This simple list made me quit a career I'd been building for 9 years. And although they're seemingly simple words on a piece of paper, it could change your life, and I'm going to tell you exactly how. Hi, my name is Victoria. I'm a former COO who turned to freelance digital business management. I like to think of myself as an organizer of entrepreneurial chaos, and after 10 years of business experience, I wanted to come onto YouTube and start sharing some of the things I've learned. This list completely changed my life. It completely changed the career that I decided to start pursuing. And as a result, I want to share exactly why and how this seemingly simple list of just words can alter an entire future for you. Do me a favor and help me build this brand new channel by liking and subscribing down below. Alright, I'm going to share just how this list actually changed my life. So you have to picture this first of all. It is 2013, I am about 17 years old, and I am walking into a martial arts studio for the very first time. I had a childhood dream of doing martial arts my entire life, so at 17 I was finally pursuing that. And little did I know that that one decision would actually create what would be my career for the next 9 years of my life. What started as simply taking classes turned into my entire life. I went from being a student at that martial arts studio to eventually the front desk rep, eventually the marketing director, eventually the martial arts director, eventually a martial arts instructor, and eventually COO of a company that would go on to do way more than just martial arts. During my time working at this business, I helped to grow this business into a 6-figure business, and we had started with really just 2 people operating 90% of the business, and eventually grew to have over 50 employees and multiple programs outside of martial arts. I really had considered myself just super lucky to have found something I was really passionate about, succeeding really well at, and overall willing to learn more and more and more at such a young age. But 7 years in, something changed for me. That original passion that I had for martial arts and learning the business and trying to help make it grow really started to dwindle down. And I had to come to terms with the fact that as I continued to look forward into the future, I stopped seeing growth and I started seeing stagnation. The scariest part of all of that for me was that martial arts and that business had literally become my identity. What do you do for a living? I'm a COO for a martial arts studio. What do you do for fun? I do martial arts. Who do you know? I know all these people within the martial arts industry. It was literally everything about who I was. And when I could no longer see the growth happening in the future, I started to ask myself questions like, if I stay here, what does 5 years from now look like for me? If I stay here, am I going to be required to live in this city forever because this is where the studio's at? Is there room for my salary growth within the next year, 2 years, 3 years, and 5 years? And if there is it where I really want to be? And I've got to be honest, I really didn't like the answers I was coming up with to those questions I was having. And this is where this value sheet comes into place. Now, this is my own version. I added a few extra words, but I originally found a very similar list by Brené Brown while reading her Dare to Lead novel. These are seemingly simple words on this page. I mean, it's things like community, compassion, fun, and while they're seemingly simple words, this truly became my compass for how I wanted to live my life. So let's dive right into the content, okay? This is going to be great if you've got a piece of paper or a pen. That's super useful. I'm also going to put this values list up directly on my website and as a downloadable link in the description below. First of all, let's cover exactly what are values. That's the base we have to start with, our foundation, okay? Words that transform into a compass for your life. So I think I have said this already before, but that I kind of used these values to create a compass for the direction I wanted my life to head into. And I want you to picture a compass, and I want you to picture it with north at the top. Go ahead and picture exactly what that compass would look like. But now if you remove north, south, east, and west, where north would be at the very top are going to be the values that you select today, or the values that you select when you go through this exercise we're about to do, and everything else is going to be south, east, and west. And what I mean by that is we're going to select values that are most important to us today, and then that is your guiding north star, so to speak. You are going to be making choices, you are going to be making rules, you're going to be designing your life around the values that you select today, because that's how you know that you're leading a life that you intend to lead and you're not just leading one by default. Values become your personal navigation system, and there's really two ways that this happens. Number one is boundaries, and number two is through tough choices. And we're going to do those things together today just so you can get an idea of it. So number one really is about setting boundaries, and this is specifically for yourself and for others in your life, okay? So what rules are we going to tell ourselves that we have to follow to make sure that we're living by our values? And what rules do we need other people to follow, even if you don't directly tell them, but like you need somebody to follow these values to be a part of your life, because you don't want to be associated with somebody that is not upholding similar values to you. And then tough choices. We're often faced with tough choices that we really aren't sure which is the best direction. We're not sure which is the better choice. And a lot of times we like to look at like a moral standing of those, and so like this is a good choice or this is a bad choice. But we also know that in real life it's not always that easy. It's not always that simple as just a yes or no question. Sometimes you have choices presented in front of you that both could be really positive choices and you're not sure how to make it. That's where your values are going to come in. And I've got a little quote here for you. Values allow you to craft a purposeful life, not live one by default. So first things first, we actually have to figure out what your values are. And I don't want you to overthink it. So I'm going to ask my video editor Z to pop up the values list for you now. She's got the document. That way it's up on the screen for you. And I want you to get ready to pause this video in a second just so you can read through the list of values that are available and start picking out which ones stand out to you based on importance, based on priority in your life. And I want you to narrow this list. This is a list of 150 values. I want you to pick 5 of the most important ones, just 5. And then we're going to go into the next step. So go ahead and pause this video and I'll be right back with you. Alright, so hopefully you've paused the video, you've figured out what your values are. So let's define those values. I'm going to use a few of mine as an example. I put 3 of my personal values on the slide, which are freedom, integrity, and connection. And the way that I define these, freedom, for example, freedom of money and time, and I actually should have put location as well, freedom of location. What I mean by that specifically is how it mostly pertains to my income, my job, and my overall how I spend my days or how I spend my weeks. This is the number one thing that as I realized freedom was most important to me, I realized I could no longer be a COO at that martial arts studio. The reason is because I felt that my salary was always going to be capped by a certain limit. I always felt that I was going to have to keep my hours at a certain time of day or number of hours a week as I continued to work for somebody else. And even if I took over that business one day, I still felt like there was going to be a commitment of time that I'm not sure I wanted to have forever. As a good manager, I wanted to be there for the people also working in that business and therefore showing up at the studio for them. And I just couldn't see myself wanting that in 5 more years. And then I say I should have also added freedom of location to this because I determined that I really wanted a job where I could live anywhere in the world and still be able to work at that job. I didn't want it to be designated based off the specific location that I live in. Integrity. Integrity is a super simple one to me, but my definition for integrity, do the things I say I will do. If I tell you I'm going to send you something by 7 o'clock that day, I want to make sure I send you something by 7 o'clock that day. Connection. Feel truly connected to the people I spend my time with. I'm very particular about who I have conversations with. I'm very particular about who I spend my time with. And it really comes down to this. If I am not enjoying a conversation, I'm honestly not afraid to just step away from it. And I think some people think that's really rude, and I'm sorry, but I only want to have conversations with people I truly connect with and people that I truly care about. That's just that. Define your values. And now that you've defined your values, how are we going to utilize them? Okay, I said this earlier in the video, but just to recap, there are two really main ways that you can utilize values: boundaries and decision maker. When we talk about boundaries, we're talking about rules that we have to live by, like ourselves, and we're talking about rules that we're going to make sure other people entering our lives live by. So if you've got a friend, Jessica, and Jessica is not living to the values that you think are important, specifically for your life and how it affects your life, then it's probably best that we start creating space between Jessica and I. You hear a lot of talk about toxic people. This is how you find out who's truly toxic in your life and who's not. You're creating boundaries. And then we've got the decision maker, which is all about, if you have a choice, how you can utilize values to determine which choice you should make. So let's go over that. Let's start with boundaries, creating rules for others in your life and yourself. I'm going to use mine as an example. Again, we've got my values are freedom, integrity, and connection. One of my boundaries now for my freedom value is specifically, I will not be a traditional employee again. What I mean by that is, first of all, I was never like a corporate employee, but I definitely won't be one of those, right? Like, that would be the complete opposite direction even from the martial arts studio I was working at. But I still don't want to be like that traditional employee that clocks in and out, that has to be at a certain location to work, you know, you have to report into a certain office. But my general rule for myself is I am not looking to be a traditional employee again. I will be a contractor, I will be a freelancer. That fits within my freedom value. Those are the job roles that fit within my freedom value. Integrity. Rules for myself. I refuse to make commitments I cannot keep. I refuse to spend time with people who do not keep their commitments. So you'll notice in the freedom one, I really only had a boundary for myself specifically, which was like, I will not be a traditional employee again. Integrity, I created a rule for myself and a rule for people coming into my life. So my rule for myself, I refuse to make commitments I cannot keep. If I know that I'm super busy and I can't get you a project back by tomorrow, I'm not going to tell you I can get you a project back by tomorrow. That's something I've worked very, very hard on getting better at, and now I stand by it as like a very, very strict rule because I understand how critical it is. And it really irks me when people are in my life making commitments that they cannot keep. They tell you they're going to be someplace at a certain time and they're not there, they're not at that place at that certain time, or they promise to get you something project-wise and they don't. Like, it really just holds a lot of things up. I would rather somebody be a person of their word and take longer on something than to break micro commitments with me, even if it's something as small as I'll email you later. Rules. I will not exert energy with people I do not feel a connection with. Okay, so this just gets back to what I was saying earlier. Like, I know people think I'm probably rude for this, but I just don't care. If I'm in a conversation with somebody and I'm not enjoying the conversation is not riveting. It's just a very bland conversation. I am not afraid to just step away from you and just stop the conversation. I want you to go through, take a look at the 5 values that you found on this list earlier. Hopefully you did that part already. And I want you to establish what are your rules, both for yourself and for other people, from each of those values. All right, next up, decision maker. So you've got some tough choices, but on the plus side, you've already selected what values are important to you. So now those are becoming your tool set for how to deal with tough choices. Let's take a look at some examples real quick. Work or fun event. All right, you have a scheduled day for work, but you also have this really cool event coming up that you want to go to, and it's just going to be a lot of fun and you're going to have a great time. Which one's the right choice? Naturally, you might lean towards one or the other just out of instinct. No, of course I have to go to work. I can't go to the fun event. Or you might be going, of course I can go to the fun event. My work doesn't care about me anyways. Like, why don't I just go? But which one is actually going to live by your values? And that just depends on what your values are. One of my values is integrity, which is about keeping commitment. If I've already specifically told my work that I would be there that particular day, then I will be there that particular day as best as I can. But if I've already told a friend that I would go to a concert with them, and then work comes to me later asking, hey, can you actually stay like this day, or can you do this project on this day? I'm sorry, I've already made a commitment. That's my integrity value coming into play, which can be applied to either one. It just depends on the specific circumstances, right? If your overall value is you want more fun or enjoyment out of life, then it makes more sense for you to go to whatever the fun event is. The great thing about this is there is truly no judgment. Some of you are probably sitting here going, is she telling me I should go to a fun event rather than work? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Or vice versa, you're going, of course I would go to the fun event. It really depends on where you're at in your life. Paycheck or watching your child's activity. I've seen a lot of parents have this specific tough choice. This might be like your child has a play, but you also have to go to work that same night in order to actually make money, in order for you guys to eat, in order for you to have a place to live, right? This is a tough choice several parents struggle with. And just to alleviate a little guilt right off the bat, I know that ideally most people in this world are not so money hungry that money comes before their children. They're just not. They are usually mostly great parents out there that are absolutely like, yes, my child comes first before money. However, if you are struggling for money and it is your job keeping you and your children afloat, typically you have to choose the paycheck over getting to watch a child activity. And I don't want you to feel guilty for that, because I think the main lesson I want you to take away from this specific example is that values can also change depending on the season. This is a really important lesson here. Just because you pick 5 values from this list today, it doesn't mean that they're going to be your values for the rest of your life. It just means that they are your top 5 values right now. Now, in some scenarios, you have parents that really do have enough money for their family. You know, they're getting by. They're just not exactly where they would want to be yet either. They might be struggling with the idea of, do I work a little bit more to make this paycheck, or do I go and watch my child's activity at like a school play or a soccer game or something like that? At that point, you should take a look at your values, determine which is the priority. And for most parents, generally that being a parent or that child is going to be your top value over the money or the financial situation. In that case, I would always recommend, like, don't pick up the extra work hours. Go watch your child's play. Go be a part of your child's sports and activities and things like that. This example is more about like when you feel obligated to go to something that you really don't want to, but maybe it's specifically for a friend, a family member, work, or something like that. How do you make the choice of, should I actually go or should I not go? And again, this comes down to your values. What are your values? If your values at the forefront are like friend, family, relationship specifically, then you would probably go to the event anyways, even if you're not particularly keen on it, because your value is like making sure to build up those relationships with your friends, your family members, your significant other, your workplace, whatever it might be. If instead your number one value is like your time, then you're probably not going to the event, because you're going, I don't really want to go to the event. My number one value is to conserve my time. Therefore, it doesn't really make sense for me to choose to go. Another example, schooling, university, studies, certificates. This is really just to ask the question, like, should you go to a particular school or should you not go? Should you study a particular field or not study the field? Should you try to earn a certain certificate, a certain award, a certain whatever, right? Time is limited, so we have to be kind of picky about what we actually want to study, what we actually want to do, because some courses, especially university, take a while, right? Take a look at your values. What do your values say about that specific schooling or that specific study or that specific certificate? Because if you're only doing something maybe because others motivated you into it, guilt-tripped you into it, and it doesn't actually align with your values, then it's not the choice you should be making for yourself. I'm going to show a couple of examples using my specific values again. So we've got that freedom, integrity, and connection. Freedom. To work for myself where there's more risk and potential for lower wages, or to work for a company that's generally considered safer and predictable salary. So this is a choice I had to make for myself, especially after leaving my career at the martial arts, in the martial arts industry. Did it make more sense for me to try and work for myself, even though there's more risk, even though there's a potential that I won't make as much money? Or does it make more sense to go work for a company that generally is considered like safer, more stable, usually predictable salary because they're trying to compete, hopefully? You guys can probably guess which one I chose. I decided to be a freelancer, therefore I decided to work for myself and take kind of the risk and the more unstable aspects of being a freelancer because I wanted that value of freedom so bad. Integrity. To just do it tomorrow because they don't need it right away, or to do it now because I've told them I would have it done. This was just kind of a quick example I threw together. I feel like there's so many examples with integrity, but it's really easy in like small conversations for us to make micro commitments just because like you're in the flux of the conversation and it happens and it's just like, oh hey, you want to come over Saturday, or can you do this thing for me, or whatever, and you just go, yeah, of course I can. That's what I want to steer clear of, for one. As far as my rules go, I made that rule about I will not make a commitment I know I can't keep. But then also when it comes to integrity, you know, sometimes it's really easy if you're working on a project or a task, if you're going, oh, well, this just isn't that important, or it's not that urgent, they don't really need it yet. Like, you want to become a little bit laxed, a little bit laid back on it. And then connection, to spend time with people out of obligation or popularity, or be exclusive with your time. So this kind of gets back to the previous example from the other slide at the very end, where it's like, should you go to an event just because like a friend or family member or work asked you to? For me, one of my values is connection. I really, really, really try to only spend time with people that I feel actually enlighten me in some way. We have engaging conversations, maybe we learn from each other, and I really try to avoid the whole trap of getting sucked into small talk just for small talk, or getting sucked into events that maybe I just feel obligated to be there for one way or another. Your values affect everything. So we've talked a lot today about boundaries, rules, and tough choices, but they honestly affect everything in your life. It affects your business. Do you have values specific for your business? And do you share them with your team members? Because when it comes to a business, if you don't have values developed for your business, then you're not hiring people off your values. You're not trying to live by your values in your like SOPs and your workflows and how you communicate with your customers. When it comes to your children, are you teaching your children your values? And I think a lot of parents like to think they're teaching their children their values, but unless you are literally laying out a list like this and trying to teach your children what they mean and how they apply in everyday life, I don't really think you're teaching children your values. Community, of course, there's a lot of great like communities or charities out there in the world that identify with certain values. We see a lot of that with things like maybe some charities really value education. Some charities really value like recycling and ecosystems and keeping nature alive, things like that. Support and relationships, I think, kind of go together actually. When I think of those things, I think about the people that are within your life, your significant other, your friends, your family, whoever you're spending a lot of time with. You ideally want to make sure that your values align. You don't have to spend time with people who have the same exact values as you, of course. In fact, I encourage you not to. It's more interesting to surround yourself with people of different values so that you can kind of question each other and have those engaging conversations. But at the same time, if somebody is blatantly disrespectful of your values, you don't want them to be a part of your life because they will continuously have a negative withdrawal from your life. My integrity value, for example, if I am around somebody that is super flaky all the time and doesn't do the things that they make commitments for, even micro commitments, I find myself being really, really agitated with them all the time. I find myself being angrier more and more, and it's not a healthy way for me to live. It's not a healthy way for them to live around me. Like, I'm just going to be annoyed at them all the time, and they're going to feel it. It's not a good combination. And I like to say that values are your superpower. So once you have started to discover these and you realize what you actually care about and you put it as a part of your compass for your life, I find that it's so much easier to actually develop your life in a way that you want. It becomes your superpower because when those choices pop up, you go, I know exactly what I'm going to choose, and I'm going to choose it because it aligns with my such and such value. Or I know not to do this because I created a boundary around my such and such value. Okay, now a lot of this video has been super peachy, super happy going, but let's talk realistic expectations real quick. You can't expect to watch this video and then maybe even glance over the value sheet and never give it a second thought and expect it to change your life. That is not how this works. What you can expect, though, is to watch this video, take a look at the value sheet, reflect on it, and make some really deep personal decisions about what those values mean to you, how you're going to implement them in your life through the boundaries, through the tough choices, and then start to shape your life around your values. And when you do that, again, it becomes that compass like we've talked about, and you are going to find that you naturally are magnetized to people with similar values or that complement your values really well. You're going to find that you're naturally magnetized to opportunities that open up for you that fit your values because you're going to be seeking them out more. And overall, you're going to be a lot happier. You're not going to be surrounding yourself with opportunities and people who do not align with those values. And as a result, you're just generally going to be a more peaceful, happy person. What you can do today, if you choose to, is to just click off this video, decide that these values are nothing more than simple words on a paper, and they have no effect on your life whatsoever. That's the second option. And I just want to leave you off with kind of one final note that any sort of change can be uncomfortable change. So if you find that you are trying to live by your values, but maybe you feel guilty, maybe you're realizing that a tough decision like a career change is coming up, it can be really tough to decide to actually pursue a life of these values because everything that you've kind of molded into so far may not fit anymore. Here's the truth. Choosing to live by your values isn't selfish. It's actually necessary because when you choose to live by your values, you are living by your most authentic self. You're going to live a much happier life, and everybody around you benefits from that as well. They're going to see you be more fulfilled, happier, and growing, and they are going to feel, that's almost addicting. It's almost contagious. It's like, what is this person doing? Why are they making all these changes? But they also seem so much happier. I'm intrigued with what they're doing. I want what they want. I had to make a really difficult choice to leave the martial arts industry as a COO and pursue my own independence and my freedom that I was looking for. And that was really scary, and it felt really selfish, and it made me feel really guilty. But it's been a couple years now. I've made way more money. I get to wake up every day and determine what my day is going to look like. I create my own hours, and it's really amazing overall. So I'm here to tell you, you don't have to feel guilty. And even though it might be a little bit difficult at the start, I promise you it is totally worth it on the other side. Listen, thank you so much for watching. You can pick this up in the description below, this list along with a few of the exercise questions we went through today. And be sure to like and follow for more videos just like this. It would mean a lot to me. And bye guys!